से होंगे। आज हमारे साथ पाल फ्रिज हैं। पाल फ्रिज का एक वसी तजर्बा है अमेरिकन पॉलिटिक्स के हवाले से, पॉलिसी मेकिंग के हवाले से, और आपने एक लंबा अरसा स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट के अंदर सर्व किया है। अमेरिका की जो लीडिंग नेगोशिएशंस थी मुख्तलिफ औकात में, उसमें आप लीड भी करते रहे, आप उस टीम का हिस्सा भी रहे। पाल, फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम फॉर आवर शो। Paul, my first question is, there is a little bit revolution in Congress. Now, Sandy Berner and Holland, they both led Democrats in Congress and they defeated Republican bill regarding American increasing defense budget, which is about $1.55 trillion, integrated defense system with Israel, and I think a war regarding Iran. So, what
Yes.
does it indicate? I mean, is there any fundamental change in American politics? If it is so, how will it impact US-Israel relationship?
Well, I wouldn't read too much into the current state of that particular legislation. I think that it's very indicative of the current state of American politics, and particularly legislative politics on Capitol Hill. There are very narrow majorities in both houses of Congress for the Republican Party. There is a faction within the Republican Party that is very skeptical of both aid to Israel specifically, but aid in general, and is concerned about growing budget deficits. So there has not been a serious effort by the Republican leadership in either house to find offsetting budget cuts that would make this dramatic increase in military spending budget neutral. And as a result, there are a number of Republicans who, in principle, are not going to support it. So I think this is the beginning of a process. I don't think it's the end, and the discussion will continue. But again, the narrow majorities and the diversity of views within the Republican caucus, particularly in the House, will make this a long and complicated discussion.
But how Israelis they would view it? I mean, have they will they have a policy of self-reliance rather than depending on American defense?
Well, the current Israeli government and Prime Minister Netanyahu in particular, I think, are as familiar with the nuances of politics on Capitol Hill as many of my colleagues here in Washington. I think they see this as part of a long process. That said, there has been an evolution of U.S. views toward Israel that's manifested in parts of both major parties, where there has been increasing skepticism of providing military assistance at the levels that we've seen recently and historically. So I think that the Israeli authorities are preparing over the long term to become less exclusively dependent upon U.S. assistance. That said, U.S. manufactured systems, U.S. licensed systems are absolutely essential to maintaining key components of the Israeli defense establishment. It's critical to maintaining the Iron Dome missile defense system. Israel is a participant in the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter. So some degree of defense integration between the United States and Israel is likely to continue for some time to come.
Very important point. Paul, another very important question is that why United States of America went into war again against Iran? I mean, there was a hotline established, memorandum of understanding was signed. So
Yes.
was it because of the idea that was given to President Trump that escalation is necessary for de-escalation and to extract further concessions out of Iran?
Well, I don't know what particular factors went into the president's decision making. national security decision-making in this administration has been highly centralized among very few people in the immediate vicinity of the president. We haven't seen the traditional structures of interagency debate and deliberation that produce consensus decisions. But that said, what the last week or 2 weeks have revealed is that yes, we had a memorandum, but we didn't have a tremendous amount of understanding. That there were provisions in the Islamabad memorandum that were understood to mean one thing by the American negotiators and understood to mean something fundamentally different by the Iranian team. And I think the difference is manifested most clearly with regard to control of the Strait of Hormuz, where the memorandum committed Iran to make its best efforts to ensure free passage through the strait, while granting to Iran and Oman the ability to negotiate long-term modalities for passage without identifying what that means. The U.S. took that to mean a restoration of the status quo before the conflict, which was respect for the Strait of Hormuz as an international waterway, and free shipping through whichever channels. There's an Iranian channel, there's an international channel, there's a channel that's closer to the Omani coastline. Iran clearly did not understand the memorandum that way, and I think that's where you saw this misunderstanding result in escalation, with Iran trying to stop commercial shipping that was not respecting Iran's procedures. You saw the United States retaliating against those attacks on commercial shipping, and the escalation proceeded from there. I think in the final analysis, both sides have a long-term interest in restoring commercial traffic through the strait in some form. And I think both sides have independently come to the conclusion that they are not going to achieve their long-term political objectives through exclusively military means. So at some point, I think the logic of the situation will lead them back to the negotiating table. I think the basic contours of the challenge are what they were 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Is there any realization in Washington, D.C., that the American retaliation was disproportionate in terms of Iranian attack on vessels? I mean, attacking 70 places in one night, more than 80 places the second night, and more than 90 places the third time. I think this was disproportionate. And history tells that there is a trend and pattern in Iranian behavior. Whenever they are pressurized or bombed, they have more firm control over the Strait of Hormuz.
Indeed, over the Strait of Hormuz, and I think there are additional weapons in the Iranian arsenal that they have not fully used yet. I think large-scale attacks on regional energy infrastructure, on natural gas fields in Qatar, on refineries, and the capacity of Iranian allied Houthis in Yemen to close the Bab el-Mandeb, which would greatly exacerbate the disruption to international energy supplies. I think on the question of proportionality, I think the intent of the United States was to establish for the Iranians that any violations of the Islamabad memorandum, violations as understood by the U.S., would be met with a massive response. I think there are two problems with that. One is that in military strategy in general, we have a saying that deterrence exists only in the mind of the adversary. So if the message that the U.S. intends to send is not the same as the message that the Iranian leadership receives, I think you risk mutual miscalculation and unintended escalation. The second problem is that the types of strikes that the United States has been conducting over the past 6 days have relied very heavily on the same kinds of weapons systems, the precision-guided munitions such as the Tomahawk cruise missile, that have been so severely depleted by the first phase of this conflict. So the longer this continues, the more acute that depletion of stockpiles becomes, with implications not just for the Persian Gulf region and the CENTCOM area of responsibility, but this will have knock-on effects in Europe, in the Asia Pacific, for the defense of Korea, Japan, and Taiwan. It will have implications for stocks that are available for purchase and transfer to Ukraine by European allies. And should the Iranian retaliation escalate along a similar trajectory, then you're talking about further depletion of U.S. and Gulf allied stocks of defensive systems, such as the Patriot and THAAD ballistic missile interceptors. So I think that the United States does not want to see the current level of kinetic military activity continue for a significant period of time.
My last question is, Paul, do you see the grouping or differences in Trump administration? As Vice President J.D. Vance, recently he has given an interview to some of the media platform in which he mentioned that he was targeted by the media influencers funded by the Israel. And moreover, he redefined America First, in which he says that America First does not mean unending wars, but it means a smart diplomacy for keeping American interest first. So is this very definition is differing the definition which is considered by the President Trump or State Secretary Marco Rubio?
Well, I think that the conventional wisdom among observers of the Trump administration is that Secretary Rubio is more sympathetic to a more traditional role for the United States in maintaining alliances, in engaging judiciously in overseas military operations to pursue national interests, whereas Vice President Vance is seeking the support of those parts of President Trump's coalition that are much more skeptical of both U.S. Overseas assistance and U.S. overseas military operations. Vice President Vance also has a particular interest, since he was the nominal head of the delegation that produced the Islamabad memorandum. So he's somewhat unusually, because this would normally be a role played by the Secretary of State or the National Security Advisor, and those are both the same person in this administration. But Secretary Rubio has not been directly involved in the negotiations, the Pakistani-mediated negotiations that produced the Islamabad memorandum. So Vice President Vance has a personal stake in the success of the diplomatic channel because he's been leading that channel.
Thank you very much, Paul, for your time and wonderful analysis. It is really appreciated. नाज़रीन, आपने पाल फ्रिज साहब की गुफ्तगू सुनी और उसका लबे लुबाब जो उन्होंने बताया वो यही था कि बेसिकली जो मैसेज एक दूसरे को देना चाह रहे हैं यूएस और ईरान, वो मिसकंसीव हुआ है, मिसपरसीव हुआ है, और जो ख्याल किया जा रहा था कि इस एस्केलेशन से ईरान को रोका जाएगा और ईरान के रिटेलिएशन से अमेरिका को मैसेज दिया जाएगा, वो मैसेज गलत अंदाज से जा रहा है. लेकिन ये बात वाज़ेह है कि अमेरिका के पास जो एम्यूनेशन का स्टॉक है या उसके अलाइज के पास, वो बड़ा शॉर्ट है और वो नहीं चाहेंगे कि ये जंग लिंगर ऑन हो. यही वजह है कि जेडी वेंस साहब ने भी इसी तरह का कोई एक बयान दिया है, जिसकी सवाल मैंने पाल फ्रिज साहब से पूछा था. अपने कमेंट से नवाजिएगा. पाल, वंस अगेन थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर योर टाइम, सर.
Thank you. My pleasure.